and welcome to my podcast. I am here with LSD from California. Um, First, tell some stuff about yourself, if you want, Alice. All right. Um, for myself, for the people that not know me, I have been vegan for nearly the half of, or I think actually over the half of my life now. I'm now 28, 29 actually, a couple of months ago. Um, I did go vegan because of actually the thing that started my transitioning into veganism was a cow on a dairy farm in the village where I was born. Uh, a cow house. How I did hear scream for his mother because because I was separated because the milk was made for the people according to the farmers and not for the baby. It started as for me also. I was on an also in the thing that's what it started for me. What started your way into veganism for you? Mm-hmm.
discovered that I was extraordinarily happy, and that there was something about this diet that really, really improved mood. I just felt really loving and peaceful and harmonious, and just I could barely get a smile off my face. Had lots of energy. Um, had dropped about 40 pounds very easily and without any challenge to do so. And after about 3 years, I felt what I think people have started to term now the raw vegan high, which is where you feel just very joyful, expansive, blissful, and generally at peace with yourself and the world. And I think that's something that I wanted to let people know is out there. It does require a commitment to the raw vegan diet, which I think is sometimes a bit challenging because it's not as easy to eat out and participate in, say, family meals and things like that where there might be cooked food served. I also discovered that if I slipped for, say, one meal on the raw vegan diet, that I would almost instantaneously or just very soon after eating the non-raw meal, it wasn't a non-vegan meal, but a non-raw meal, that this high would be removed and I would just feel like I needed to go to sleep almost immediately. So that just highlights to me why it is that people often drink stimulants, like tea and coffee, is that, or Coca-Cola, things like that, is that they are so brought down, and their energy levels are so depressed by the cooked food that they're eating that they they need to stimulate themselves artificially with something else in order to keep their energy levels, basically in order to keep themselves awake. So I think that's something I wanted to share. And maybe not every vegan is familiar with how the raw vegan diet is good for health. Um, it does require a little bit of attentiveness to your meal. You can't just go out and buy any junk food. You generally buy things from the produce section and the bulk and processing, so everything that goes into the food that you're eating. It's a lot of raw vegans are also choose to eat organic food. This raises the cost of your diet, but it does tend to provide a lower degree of toxins and other chemicals that might be used in fertilizing or in pesticides that might be used to remove um, creatures from the environment of the plants that are grown. So it is a consideration if you're on a tight budget. You can probably eat regular raw vegan, but if you want to eat organic raw vegan, then that's going to add some money to your budget. Otherwise, if you don't eat organic raw vegan, then it tends to be a very inexpensive diet. But you need to budget time to prep the food for yourself. I find in general that prepping raw vegan food, once you get used to it, is not actually that time consuming. Some people think it is, but really cooking is also time consuming, and that also takes time out of time it takes to bake bread, the time it takes to cook the soup and chop vegetables. So really, what you're doing instead of cooking is you're putting things in, say, a food processor or a blender, or maybe dehydrate. Now, dehydration does take time, but it's really just very passive time. For most of it, you do the small amount of prep work, and then you put things in the dehydrator, and then they dehydrate for hours. So you have to think ahead and plan ahead, and maybe prepare your food in advance for the week. But most of it can be refrigerated. Raw vegans don't tend to, um, although they will freeze things, it's generally frowned upon because it does remove some of the enzymatic activity of the food. So it's best to just simply get fresh food and fresh or dry food, and then process that accordingly. And in the raw vegan restaurant, since we were on the cutting edge, if you like, of vegan diets, um, we did quite a lot of meals that were did produce quite a few meals that were like traditional. shape of an almond, and it had portobello mushrooms in it. So it looked kind of brown. It looked a little bit like meatloaf. And then we served that with a raw ketchup and raw date mustard. So that was an example of the sort of things that we did to try to give people something that looked familiar, but yet was so much better and healthier for them and the creatures in the environment. So it was definitely an opportunity and a showcase to showcase the raw vegan diet for the people in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And people came from all over the country to come to the restaurant. We had people come from Texas and from to have a big Thanksgiving, raw vegan Thanksgiving, and we had people come from Southern California as well, pilgrimage up here to go to the a raw vegan restaurant because they were using many of them were using raw vegan diets. Not just for health maintenance or for prevention of disease, but also for curing diseases. So they were using it. I remember having one cancer patient come in, another diabetes patient come in, and they were using the raw vegan diet to reverse their disease.
Interesting. Well, do you still eat mostly raw?
Yes, I do. I would say I'm in the, I don't really go for the raw vegan high right now. I'm perfectly happy the way the way I am. But I do eat about probably about 85% raw and completely 100% vegan. So occasionally I'll toss in some say rice and lentils, and uh, very, very. I really try to stay away from the vegan transition food, like the things that look like meat, the things that look like cheese, things that look like eggs and yogurt, and I just stick with again the produce section in the bulk bins and really try to shop there. Again, a little bit of brown rice and lentils, just to provide a little bit of a substance in the evening is good for maintaining your weight. One of the things that you notice on the raw vegan diet, and I kind of wondered at the time where it was going to end, is that there's a significant weight loss. The diet tends to be very low fat. The diet is kind of low in complex carbohydrates like heavy starches, like pastas. There's no pastas. There's no no cooked potatoes. Potatoes are not really used in the raw vegan cuisine. Um, so sweet potatoes are, but not regular white potatoes. So that reduces the glycemic index of the diet significantly, which means those who have trouble with diabetes can often find themselves, especially type 2 diabetes, can often find themselves getting off insulin completely. There's a gentleman in um, Arizona that specializes in doing exactly that and helping people do exactly that by the name of Dr. Gabriel Cousins. And his clinic is well known for helping people reverse type 2 diabetes and improve um, the diets of those who suffer from type 1 diabetes and reduce their insulin intake. So if anyone's interested in that, they can contact him, search for him and contact him. He has a video online that's on YouTube called Simply Raw, Reversing Diabetes in 30 Days, which outlines case studies of several people who've been through this program and the improvements that they've seen.
All right. Um, what kind of raw or diet is that what you follow? Is it based around more about vegetables or more around fruit?
Um, I would say that fruit is the basis of my diet. I probably would eat around 50% fruit. I tend to follow the guidance of nature, and that looking at our nearest relatives that are still living wild, the great apes, like the gorillas and orangutans, chimpanzees, bonobos, and trying to see whether what their diets are and how that might reflect on what my my diet should be. Their diets tend to be focused around fruits. They also eat greens, shoots. Sometimes they eat some insects, um, which I think provide just a general protein source and a source of omega-3 fatty acids. Now, one thing I do now that I didn't do when I was on the raw vegan diet is I do take a supplement of algal oil. This is the omega. It's very high in the two essential fatty acids, DHA and EPA, that are helpful for brain health and maintaining memory. So I do recommend those if people start to get a little forgetful, then that will usually clear it up very quickly. So if anybody is thinking that they need fish oil, no, no, not at all. In fact, what you need is algal oil, which is what the fish eat in order to get fish oil in their tissues. So that's a much kinder way of doing it, is taking it from the algae rather than taking it from fish.
Yeah. For myself, I think I try to eat more fruit. I think right now I eat 50% raw. I think some days I eat 70 to 75% raw, and mostly fruit. Um, because I try to hold protein low because of my genetic problem, like you know, like I have told in the past
Right,
year.
right.
Uh,
Now that results in an excess of methionine.
yeah, an extra
In your
acid for my time
methionine.
of the amino acids I'm finding. And specifically of actually the gate and the part that actually my body turns methionine into homocysteine, and
Almost.
normally your body turns homocysteine into cysteine, and then cysteine, and then taurine, and
Well,
other stuff.
in another pathway.
Yeah.
I think I was reading a very interesting a segment of a New York Times book on alternative New York Times book on alternative health, and it was talking about how homocysteine levels and methionine levels are a major marker for serious diseases like heart disease. In fact, almost as much of a marker as cholesterol, high cholesterol levels. So they were. This book was, again, it's published by the New York Times, so it's science-based research. Was definitely of the opinion that high animal product-based diets that result in high methionine and homocysteine levels, or homocysteine, I should say, levels, tend to be also as much of a marker for heart disease, which is our major number one killer in the United States, as high cholesterol levels. So this is
Not only in the United States.
what's that?
It's not only in the United States, also in Europe and Canada, and
I think
also to the third world.
in most countries that eat a meat-heavy diet,
Yeah.
so you English influenced countries, Commonwealth countries, tend to be of that opinion. Now, there may not have been enough farmland in the UK to sustain its population without utilizing animals, but in other countries there's more than enough farmland, and we're wastefully feeding these human edible proteins like soybean and corns. We're wastefully feeding that to animals in order to produce a very small amount of protein, when humans could just simply eat soybean and corns.
Yeah.
So
It is also in England, if I remember good, around 70% of their land is used for animal agriculture. In and the shepherds. I did watch a couple of weeks ago was a video of earthling ants. That and there was also were sheep farmers that claimed that their use a lot of land that not can be used for other kinds of agriculture. But I was thinking, on the hills where they were talking about, you can plant fruit trees on them. Fruit trees don't uh, can actually live can grow on hills easily.
Well, that's a good point, Grimshire, and maybe it's just that they haven't tried growing crops. They've just been using using animals to eat grass rather than trying to grow crops
Yeah.
on this land. I mean, one of the things that if you've ever lived in England, I think you will notice is that there's a lot of rainfall in England. Since there's such a lot of rainfall, there's not the issues that say we have in California, where we have often drought seasons
Mm-hmm.
and very low rainfall, and most of the water needs to come from underground.
Yeah.
Um, so in the UK, you have a lot of rainfall, and so I would expect that if there's grass, there's probably the possibility that you can grow a crop there
Yeah.
rather than.
And also, if you think about it, um, do you know what kind of plants actually grow very good in very dry places? For example, olives and date trees can live in near desert-like places. Did you know that?
Correct. Yes. When I was in Spain, in the virtual desert, I mean, it was really very dry, arid climate near Madrid. Um, I noticed how many olive trees there were, and I was surprised that they were growing. And they actually grow up here. This is a very dry area of California. It's not the coastal area, and we see, uh, you know, the ability of uh, black walnuts and English walnuts that are grown on top, sort of grafted on top of black walnuts. They grow without any water. Um, there's certain types of drought tolerant. I think we have a good crop of pears in this area. Also, with some water, you're able to grow cannabis, which is another source of a very high quality protein, hemp seed, which is becoming more and more common because we're now able to legally grow cannabis as farmers. So this is an important crop that I think will increase the availability of high quality vegan proteins.
The original use of cannabis was for um, making um, what's it called? Um, how's it word in English?
Well, cannabis has many uses.
No, yeah, there
It
did use it
has a
in the
strong fiber.
did use it in the ships, um,
Right.
for ships
That's
for
it's
the for the um,
that's for
how
the
does
rope.
that yeah the ropes
Rope.
yeah
Yes, hemp fiber, which is the fiber from the cannabis
yeah
plant, or certain types of cannabis plants that are grown primarily for their fiber. Um, but cannabis has a lot of different uses. It produces an oil,
mm-hmm.
very high quality,
Yeah.
high omega-3 rich oil. It also produces hemp seed, which is a complete protein. It's one of the few proteins that are considered complete,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore, a solo substitute for animal flesh. Um, it is a very good fiber. Obviously, being used in ship ropes, it attests to the fact that it's a good fiber. It's a paper replacer. So
Mm-hmm.
the Declaration of Independence was drafted on hemp paper, and a lot of paper used to be made from hemp, cannabis hemp. And
Yeah.
it's also an extraordinarily good medicine for certain purposes. For say sedation, for PTSD, for um, various types of conditions, for appetite stimulation, for those who have nausea due to medications. It has a lot of different uses. So it's definitely an up and coming plant. In fact, what I would like to see is that those who are currently making a living from animal agriculture, if they think they can't make as good a living from plant agriculture, that perhaps they could be given the authority to grow a hemp farm instead of an animal farm. That way, we could have complete proteins. We could have good fiber that could prevent the cutting down of trees for plant fiber, and we could also have a would say something that's improving the um, the carbon dioxide situation. So it would help with the climate change issue. Um, so in overall, because animals tend to are one of the most significant single sources of climate change driving and greenhouse gases. So to have to replace them, uh, animal agriculture with something that is a green agriculture instead reduces the um, carbon dioxide release would be beneficial. And so, and it would also be a substantial cash crop. As although the price of cannabis would most likely go down in an environment where we have a lot more people growing it, it would still probably have a decent profit margin and would be able to sustain farmers that currently are growing animals rather than plants.
Yeah, I also have heard that some of the ex animal abusers did turn in to mushroom farmers.
True farms. Well,
Yeah.
that is another thing. Again, they probably, most of the reason that people are farming animals rather than plants right now has to do with the fact that it's profitable to do so. The profit margin has to be taken out the the equation. It's profitable to do so because the feed for animals is heavily subsidized, and so it by the U.S. government, at least in the U.S. by the U.S. government. So we really need to remove those subsidies on animal feed, and we need to make it so that you know the cost of meat is actually fair. It's a fair cost rather than the subsidized cost. Why are our governments subsidizing food that virtually every health authority will tell you is unhealthy for you? Why is that? Why is the government subsidizing foods that are healthy for us? Fruits and vegetables, those and nuts and seeds. Those are foods that are healthy for our species. Those are foods that are natural for our species. And the governments of the world should be subsidizing those foods, not the production of unhealthy foods that are also very harmful to animals and the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think once the price of a steak reaches say $70 with its taking away the subsidies and maybe adding some taxes for the environmental degradation and the climate change impact of meat and the deforestation impact, maybe then people won't buy it anymore. I mean, it has to be more expensive. As long as it's cheap and subsidized, it's going to be consumed by people who don't know any better. Also, we need to remove all of the advertising. I don't know if everybody's sensitive to this, but I find it very difficult to watch television as a vegan. I find that the commercials, at least in the United States, are heavily biased towards animal product consumption, and that's being ethically and ethically very undesirable for me. I find it hard to watch television as long as meat and other animal products are being so heavily promoted. Um, I don't think that I don't see why. Well, let's say this: we don't see a lot of uh, advertisements promoting nuts or seeds or fruits or vegetables because those are our natural diet. Those are what we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to eat. Those are what we should as children be naturally attracted to eating. Um, we do see a lot of things, a lot of advertisements advertising, meat and eggs and dairy products, things that we should never be eating. But the only reason that we consider them food is because we're constantly bombarded with programming via the television in order to encourage us to eat those food by advertisers, by people that are and companies that are profiting from the sale of those products. So that also needs to be ended, just like we ended the ability of tobacco companies and alcohol companies to advertise. We also need to end the abilities of animal agriculturists to advertise on television. That needs to be ended. And I think also probably pressure needs to be put upon those making films and other television shows to end to start promoting veganism and to end the promotion of animal product heavy diets, which are known to be unhealthy. So we need to get pressure groups, encourage pressure groups to put pressure on those who are producing media for public consumption to make sure that the right message is being sent out there about the healthier diet, which is the vegan diet.
Hmm. And also, don't forget about the current coronavirus that probably will have not be this problematic if we did live in a society that did not raise animals for consumption.
Well, right. I think you might be referring to a recent study that showed that vegans, in other words, those who consume a plant-based diet, had a 73% lower chance of suffering severe to moderate coronavirus cases when they actually, if and when they were actually infected. So this shows that a plant-based diet is actually protective against diseases like COVID-19.
Yeah, but also one out of 3 out of 4 infectious diseases, arising infectious diseases come from animals. I also
That's another major
yeah
issue, which is that we are breeding by having factory farms where animals are in very close
yeah
quarters with each other and then fed lots of antibiotics. I think 80% of antibiotic use in the United States are fed to animals. So rather than feeding all these antibiotics to animals in close quarters, because that's basically what enables factory farms. Prior to the widespread use of antibiotics, we were not able to have animals in factory farms. It just wasn't possible. The same thing would happen in a factory farm that happened in the German concentration camps, which was the Nazi concentration camps, which was that people in very tight quarters died from disease. And the same sort of thing is observed in animal farms if you don't use antibiotics. So animal farms do use antibiotics in order to be able to concentrate animals in the extreme horrific conditions that they're currently being kept in factory farms. So those antibiotics, because they're fed in such quantity, breed antibiotic resistant bacteria. And then those antibiotic resistant bacteria then infect people. Um, Certain ones will mutate to be infectious to people, so or humans. So that means that we have diseases like the swine flu, the bird flu, COVID-19, thought to be also transmitted by animals. Um, so it is a imperative that we stop using animals in agriculture and switch to plants. We do not get diseases like COVID-19 from plants. Um, we so really it should be a
yeah.
no-brainer that if you're concerned about diseases, concerned about pandemics, we just simply stop using animals.
Mm-hmm. That's a no-brainer. We
No-brainer.
we are also animals, and so it is easily to assume that we can get a lot of the diseases that come from animals. And basically, a factory farm is a kind of a bio lab for creating viruses.
Quite true, and very concerning, I think, given what we've just been through with COVID. And people we're sort of coming out the other side, but there's such a huge economic damage from these you know potential pandemics that I think we really have to think seriously whether it's worth continuing to um, make animal products available for humans to consume when they have no reason to consume them. B, it's incredibly cruel to animals. C, it's damaging the environment at an alarming rate and causing the leading cause of deforestation. And C, we're one of the largest single contributors to climate change, and climate change is having a major impact on our, and will have a very substantial future impact on our economic systems and quality of life for our children, and maybe even as those who are younger in our lifetimes, and those who have children certainly in their lifetimes. So we really do need to have a diet humans, because we're becoming such a dominant force on the planet, we really do need to have a diet that is sustainable long term and less environmentally harmful.
Yeah, and also think about in the indirect, you can say, racism from Smithfield, that are thrown in manure all over poor neighborhoods where mostly, at least in the United States, live black people and other people of color, like Doctor um, um, what's his name? Doctor Melton Mill was talking about that. That's that black African American doctor that is vegan.
Well, I think there's a disproportionate number of people of color who are involved in the animal agriculture industry. These are very, very unpleasant jobs.
Mm-hmm.
These are not jobs that most people want, and so they are, you know, they're usually filled by people who are desperate for the income. Um, if a lot of people quit these jobs as soon as they realize what's involved. I know that my sweetie, the reason he stopped eating flesh was he went to work in a slaughterhouse in Chicago, and he was so horrified about what went on there that he asked to quit the same day. They said that they wouldn't pay him if he didn't work at least a week. So he worked a week and then he quit. So that he said it was just horrible, and he also is now vegan, and he was a lifelong. Before that, he was a pescatarian for many years. Um, his thinking was that at least the animals lived free, although fish farming is now becoming more and more of a problem, and the environmental degradation of wildlife killing by the commercial fishing industry is a horrible, horrible thing. I mean, there's a new film out called Seaspiracy that highlights how there just is no sustainable fishing. If you care about marine life, if you care about wildlife and the harm that humans are doing to the oceans, the only thing to do really is to boycott the entire commercial fishing industry. A fishing net doesn't know the difference between a dolphin or an extremely rare creature like a vaquita, for example, and a fish. It doesn't know the difference. It's an indiscriminate killer of wildlife, and bycatch is fundamental to any form of fishing industry that uses nets. It just cannot continue. We cannot allow people to continue to think of the oceans as their personal vending machines that they use to get money. Okay, they can do other things. They can all do other things, and that's what we need to be encouraging humans to do: is stop thinking of wildlife as their source of income. Just like we ended fur trapping, we now have a fur ban in California, so even fur farming is no longer allowed in California. And I think that's an important step. But I think ending wildlife killing of all types is what we really need to be doing in order to prevent the damage to ecosystems. Um, Restoring in ecosystems where we have overpopulation of certain species, we need to restore the predators that originally would have kept those species in check. Um, Nature has a series of ways of managing populations and has done so for billions of, probably millions, if not billions of years. And we need to respect those laws and those ways of managing populations. Disease, predation, um, infant mortality, those things are all ways of managing populations that are natural and that nature should be using. We should, as humans, should not be attempting to do something that nature does perfectly well by herself.
Yeah, there's also then that majority of the food on the world is actually grown in third world countries, and their food is also transported to the West, with also with is also a bit of elitist actually. Meat dairy neck eating is also kind of elitism, in contrary with what some people want to say. Veganism is not an elitist way of living. Actually, eating animals is elitist way of living, because for
Very much so. Very much so. In first world countries, you see a lot more animal product consumption, which is erroneous. And it's as you start to as that same sort of pattern starts to um, happen in other countries as they become more affluent, they start eating more meat and their health goes down substantially. We see this in Mexico, um, where the traditional diet was more, very close to vegan really. Beans and rice was kind of the fundamental beans, rice, and corn, squash, and then more recent additions, things like lettuce and tomatoes. These I've actually written a vegan cookbook for for the Mexican cuisine. I spent 10 years in Mexico, ran a vegan restaurant, owned and operated a vegan internet cafe, and basically learned how to create all the Mexican dishes. But because it was vegan, we, I had to make some changes to the recipes, traditional recipes, and but trying to give the same flavor and the same general idea, in the same way that we've done with some of the raw vegan foods. So in my previous restaurant, so this highlighted to me how far Mexicans have gotten from their native diet, and how that's resulting in disease and obesity among the Mexican population. So their obesity rate is about the same as the United States now. So they're in the like 1/3 of Mexicans would be clinically obese, which obesity is a deadly disease. It's a usually a function of excessive amounts of fat in the diet. Um, a lot of people erroneously think that meat is protein, when in fact meat is often, and meat products and animal products like that are often very, very high in fat. And the fat is not even something that you can just cut off. It's something that is actually in between the layers of muscle tissue. There is fat there, and that fat is of a saturated variety, and it contains cholesterol. So these are issues that um, contribute to poor human health and heart disease and obesity. So what really needs to happen is that we need to look at that traditional diet, that original, indigenous Mexican diet that was relatively free of animal products.
mm-hmm.
Um,
That's
because
that's
when
yeah.
the conquistadors came to Mexico, they brought horses, they brought weapons, um, steel weapons and metal weapons. So these had not previously been used or were not available to um, indigenous Mexicans to use. So
Mm-hmm.
their degree of predation was so much less, on, the hunting was so much less, and they just relied mainly on agriculture, on what they called the three sisters of corn, beans, and squash. And
Mm-hmm.
then later on, they added rice to that as a good complementary protein to beans. Um, but the original protein combination that they used was beans and corn. Beans and corn is also a complementary protein combination, just like beans and rice. So, where you might see, like on a traditional English platter, for example, you might see animal products on there. You could simply just put beans and rice, and that would provide a complete protein source, as well as providing healthier carbohydrates. And I do recommend um, using brown rice whenever possible. Has higher fiber content, and also more nutrients as a result of the leaving on of the bran husk.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a significant nutrient deficiency that arose because rice was being polished to make white rice, and the polishing which removed a very key part of the nutrients that then resulted in a nutrition deficiency disease. So when that was added back on, then the rice was nutritious again, or sufficiently nutritious to avoid that deficiency disease. I think it was vitamin B6. Um, but I'd have to just look up the research on that.
All right. Yeah, that remembers me actually of a study um, from Rita Rita Lowell, how as Native American from the Choctaw, and they also have their diet is also traditional diet. This was based around a kind of squash and corn and acorns. Did make bread from acorns.
Right. Well, acorns are nutritious.
Oh yeah, and a kind of and pumpkin. That was basically and or
Oh, squash.
yeah
Pumpkin is squash. Yeah.
yeah they call it in their culture they call it mother mother corn, father pumpkin, and sister bean.
Well,
And it,
see, that's again that's the squash,
yeah
um, bean, and corn
yeah
combination, which was the winning combination in the early indigenous Mexican cuisine.
yeah
And I think that's
uh,
the addition of acorns is very interesting. Acorns are not palatable or not really edible without processing.
mhm
So what is necessary is to leach the tannins out of the acorns because they're very astringent
mhm
and could cause constipation and
yeah
other issues with the tannins. So they're processed usually in running water. Say putting them into like a basket and then
mhm
putting them um, into a stream and then letting the stream leach out the tannins over time. They can also be boiled and things like that, but usually you know so the stream putting them into a stream was the better solution, and they do provide a very nice starchy uh, kind of a flour that once they're ground up they can be made into cakes, and so acorn cakes are a good source of vegan nutrition. In fact, there are oak trees all around Northern California, and I like to think that they were probably Native American orchards because they grow without water. Um, they grow naturally, even in a very dry climate like the one I live in. They grow extensively, and they provide a huge bounty of acorns every year. And those acorns can then be collected, and they'll last a lot for a very long time. So they're good winter food as well, because you have to also think about if you're wildcrafting food, you have to think about what are you going to do during the winter when it's cold and you can't grow a crop.
mhm
So uh, acorns provided that helpful winter food to um,
mhm
keep you alive during winter. The other thing I wanted to mention are things like berries, for example. Berries have such an excellent nutritional profile, and other foods like superfoods like the deep greens, things like kale, chard, and spinach. These are these should be part of our natural diet. These foods are superfoods. They should be everyone should be having a good servings of berries and greens per day, deep greens per day, just to keep up their nutrition. There's so much low level vitamin deficiency um, in our diets because well, in the standard diets, because people are not taking into account the need for the nutritious elements that occur in what would be uh, in what would be more natural foods like berries, for example. Berries are a great source of food. And by that I mean usually blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries. Um, there are some other berries of note. Strawberries are great if you can get organic, but they are also very heavily dosed with toxins in the non-organic growing acids. So that means it would probably make a lot more sense to either grow your own if you can, because I know you've been growing your own strawberries,
Yeah,
um,
I
or
thought a
or
lot
buy
is.
or buy organic. They are one of what they call the dirty dozen, which are foods that are um, heavily dosed with pesticides and or potentially toxic fertilizer agents.
Which ones are um, what are the other ones that are on that list?
Um, let's see if I can find that. It's in one of my books. I have a chart of it. 12 foods that are high in pesticides. Okay. Strawberries, number one. Then spinach. So when I talk about greens, I do usually recommend um, greens that are organic. It's very easy in the United States to get organic spinach and organic um, salad greens, so I recommend doing that. The other one is nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, potatoes, and sweet bell peppers. So, and then I think there's the other one is the Clean 15. So there's the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15.
All right, and what are the
And
ones?
so what you would do for the Clean 15 is look for foods that are in that group. Then you won't have to worry so much about buying organic. So if you're buying from the Dirty Dozen, you should buy organic, and if you're buying from the Clean 15, you don't have to worry so much. I think they include. I'm just trying to do a search right now, but my computer's not behaving. So give me a second to answer that question.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe I can put
Are you able to hear me
a
now?
list of it in the chat. Maybe people find it interesting. For the people that listening now, the video that I show you, the title of is below. It's my video on Native Americans and their diet of mother corn and father pumpkin and sister bean. I explained what in terms like Professor Rita Law explains in her writings. I use the terms that she did use. Columbus did come in 1492, and it's basically negative affected the populations. It's many things that he did do in name of the Spanish. Even he was an Italian, like enslaving, sexual abusing, according to some writers. Even some of his luck king books, like I did say in this video, explained in that video. Here.
Oh, okay, Grim.
Hmm?
I have the list of the Clean 15 now. Whenever you're ready to hear that.
Ah, yeah, that's good.
Okay, the Clean 15 are avocados, which they use. Since you don't use the skin, they're actually pretty good. Sweet corn, pineapples, frozen sweet peas, onions, papayas, eggplants, asparagus, kiwis, cabbage, cauliflower, cantaloupe, broccoli, mushrooms, and honeydew melons.
Honeydew melons.
Honeydew melons. Yep.
Oh,
It's,
that's sad. I like those.
no, those are the clean 15.
Oh,
That's the clean
oh, that
15.
are clean. Oh,
Yeah, those are the
I
clean
like
ones. And
I
then
like melons.
and these are as of 2019.
I think I can eat the whole day melons. Probably not good for my budget. Eating the whole day honeydew melons.
So these are from the environmental working group um, that put this together. Just to give you the highest, the Dirty Dozen is the 12 fruits and vegetables that contain the highest concentration of pesticides, which the environmental working group recommends buying organic. And the Clean 15 is a list of 15 fruits and vegetables that contain the fewest concentration of pesticides, which they believe are the safest foods to buy conventionally. And the lists are assembled based on data from tests recently conducted by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as well as the USDA, as well as the USDA's pesticide testing program and the Food and Drug Administration, um, and they explain that on their website at ewg.org. So if anybody's interested in the detail on that.
Yeah, maybe this one is also interesting for you. Uh, I was talking also about Columbus and some of the dirty things that he was doing. This essay, this book actually, also talks a bit about some of the things what he did do. It is called sexual history or something like that, and there's a book that is actually written about sexual violations of certain people in history that what they were doing.
Well, I'm no fan of Columbus.
Yeah, Columbus was not a nice guy. Yeah, but maybe yeah, I was thinking maybe you find it interesting, so I will share that Discord to you if you want to find a reason to find him even more annoying or more disgraceful. Uh, he was not a guy of honor.
Probably wasn't vegan.
Yeah, also he was also. There are many biographies that say that he was also a sexual abuser of women, and some claim even that he maybe abused children and Native Americans. Um, I did comment that because I was
I,
a
I
bit
think
of.
there's this is part of the reason that there's people that have written excellent books on the subject of ethics and how like for instance the World Peace Diet by Dr. Will Tuttle. It's an excellent book and it deals with how once you start exploiting other creatures, it's not that much of a jump to start exploiting humans. When you've sexually exploited cows and raped cows to become pregnant in order to steal their milk, it's not so hard a leap to start raping human women. It's once you started killing babies for food, it's not that much of a leap to start killing human babies. Um, it's just as long as we're killing other animals and thinking that it's okay to murder and exploit and rape and kill other animals, um, it's something that will stay within our population as a mindset that some people continue to have. I'm not saying everyone thinks that way. Clearly, vegans
Yeah.
are boycotting that sort of unethical behavior, but it's something that those who continue to condone it while thinking that it's it's okay to do to animals, but it's not okay to do to humans. It's really not okay to do to anyone. My view is if you don't want it done to you, you don't do it to others. It's a simple expression of the golden rule. Um, that's the one ethical rule that pretty much every religion can agree upon. It's in one way or another they have some expression of this law of reciprocity. And one thing that we can use to guide us ethically is in that law when we're thinking about whether it's okay to do things to others, or would would is the treatment of animals in animal agriculture okay? Well, think about this. Would you want to be crammed into a factory farm, basically a concentration camp for animals? Would you want to be transported without food and water for days in tight quarters? Would you want to then be murdered while you're watching others in front of you be murdered? This is the sort of thing you can ask yourself. And if your answer to those are no, 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 then you should join the vegan boycott. Vegans are just boycotting animal abuse. We're boycotting animal abuse that we would want to happen to us. So it's completely unnecessary. I mean, based on our physiology, there's nothing in our physiology that suggests we should even be remotely consuming animal products. We're not baby cows. We're obviously not predators. We're not born with a fishing pole in our hand. We're eating the menstruation of other creatures just sounds kind of weird. Why are we even participating in this thing other than to make certain industries very wealthy?
Yeah.
It's an error. It
Yeah.
halves our lifespan. Instead of living to our natural 120 years, we're you're dying of heart disease, cancers, diabetes, and other issues. At I think one of the books that I thought was very impactful was a book by Dr. Michael Greger called "How Not to Die," and in it he points out that vegan diets lower your chance of dying from 14 out of the 15 leading causes of death in the United States. Well, the only exception, you say, whoa, what's the exception? The exception is accidents. Apparently, vegans don't, being vegan doesn't prevent you from having accidents. But all of the preventable causes of death, you're going to reduce your chances of experiencing them by being on a vegan diet. It's obvious, and it should be obvious by now to everybody in this who's ever studied diet to any significant degree, that you're going to live longer, probably, and be healthier on a vegan diet on average. There's still some vegans who die early. There's still some non-vegans who live to old age. But
Yeah, and
if
there
you're
are
looking
also smokers that live to some smokers that would live to 100.
right, we've determined that smoking is definitely bad for your health. I mean, there's no question. Um,
Yeah,
but
I know,
so
I know those people that say that are smoking. That say, oh, but I know I have an uncle that lived to 89 years old and he smoked like a chain a smoker.
and there's people that see what often happens with these exceptional cases is, first of all, they're outliers. Maybe they have particularly good genes, or maybe they compensated with their behavior with vitamin supplementation or diet. Maybe they were eating a particularly good diet. We often see the case of like drinkers living into an old age, and I'm like, well, alcohol is a poison. It's definitely a poison. It poisons your various organs, helps do severe damage to your liver, creates cirrhotic livers, also damages your pancreas, damages your brain, especially your executive function that enables you to kind of take charge of your life and be the executive of your life. Um, it's severely damaging to the human organism, and yet it has this somewhat protective effect, because it's also a solvent, and it protects people from heart disease to a certain extent. So it'll kill them with cirrhosis, or it'll they'll get pancreatitis, or they'll suffer brain damage, but they might live a little bit longer than they ordinarily would have by eating a meat heavy diet. So what the Harvard School of Public Health is basically put the nail in the coffin of alcohol and said, listen, There's no healthy amount of alcohol. There's just no healthy amount, not zero. So the approximate amount of alcohol in a healthy human diet is zero. It kills 2 million people a year. Um, and there, of course, the Harvard School of Public Health also says that the approximate healthy amount of meat in a human diet is also zero. So, we have pretty definitive evidence right now that red meat causes cancer. The World Health Organization has now put it in the class 2 carcinogen. Um, However, processed meat, things like bacon, spam, sausages, ham, any meat that's undergone processing, hot dogs, these are all now in the class 1A, known human carcinogen class. Um, the IARC, the Research Council that advises the World Health Organization on carcinogenicity of substances, has now determined that there's virtually no scientific debate on the fact that processed meat causes cancer, and in particular contributes to colon cancer, which is one of the bigger, um, more common cancers in the United States, at least. So we're dealing with, known human carcinogens here. This is in the same category as tobacco, which is a known human carcinogen, kills 8 million people a year. Same as asbestos and plutonium. These are all known human carcinogens, and right up there is processed meat, right up with all the others. So I think we should be talking about labeling processed meat with carcinogenicity labels. This is something that's, even though it's supposed to be done in California under Prop 65, we still, people can still buy a packet of bacon. It doesn't have a Prop 65 carcinogenicity warning on it saying, processed meats are known human carcinogen. Um, there should be labeling. There should be truth in labeling. There should be labels on every packet of meat. Every packet of red meat, for example, it should say probable human carcinogen. And this isn't being done yet. The agricultural lobby, animal agricultural lobby, is too strong yet to support this sort of obvious labeling that should be going on food. People should know if their food's carcinogen. Um, Cancer is a major cause of death. I think we need to have that clearly labeled.
Yeah. 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 Do you want also? Do you have also some tips for people that maybe wants to do more activism but don't know how to start? Maybe
Right. Well,
some people are
one.
interested in that.
Well, first of all, I really recommend that the easiest form of activism by far is going vegan. You don't have to get a big sign. You don't have to go out and do any marches. You can just simply change what you buy at the grocery store. Very simple. It's a very important form of activism. It's a boycott. People have been boycotting things for uh, centuries now. If you think something is morally and ethically wrong, you boycott it. That's exactly what vegans are doing. Vegans are boycotting animal abuse, harmful use of animals. Very simple, very straightforward, very ethical. Um, if you don't think it's okay to abuse animals, you should be vegan. So just simply change your lifestyle to accommodate that. Vegans, just to be clear what that means, is vegans boycott the harmful use of animals. They boycott things like animal products in food, animal products in clothing, the exploitative use of animals for entertainment purposes, like at SeaWorld or circuses or horse races, which harm horses. Many horses die as a result of horse racing. Dog races, things like that. Obviously, dog fights and bullfights and cockfights and things like that are all already pretty much illegal, but vegans would also boycott those. Vegans do not um, think it's appropriate to be breeding animals. They tend to adopt rather than buy from breeders. Um, they so they might go to their local shelter and rescue an animal that's in need of rescue. Um, so it in terms of companion animals and how to cope with a companion animal that is a carnivore or an omnivore like a dog. Cats are carnivores, dogs are omnivores. It is possible to feed cats and dogs vegan. They're obviously not vegan in their instincts or in their natural environment, if there could be thought to be a natural environment for a domestic cat or domestic dog. But they are able to be fed safely vegan. There's a Facebook group and page that I dedicate to that particular topic called Vegan Cats and Dogs, and people can check it out if they're interested. It's for those who are sincerely interested in uh, not killing other creatures to feed the creature in their care. And the usual question vegans ask themselves is, well, why kill one creature to feed another? What we're what we're working on doing successfully is finding um, a way to feed a species appropriate set of macronutrients along with species specific micronutrients to create a well balanced diet for dogs and cats. Cats are a little bit more complicated because they cannot use beta carotene, so they need preformed vitamin A in their diets to remain healthy. Also, they have a tendency on a more alkalizing diet, which vegan diets tend to be more alkalizing in terms of the ash production. Um, they often need some periodic monitoring of their urinary pH.
Is it also
So,
not? Is it also not that male cats sometimes have problems with getting too much having problems with getting enough taurine?
well, that's part of the supplemented diet. Most taurine is produced by bacteria. It's available in supplement form, so that's a vegan product. Bacterial productions are considered to be vegan.
Yeah, I have also heard um, that the taurine in regular cat food is also is most of the time synthetic
It's
taurine
it's almost always synthetic.
because the taurine is destroyed by the processing of the food.
Right. Um, that's pretty much true of almost all animal food. Is that it's so processed. So the dog food that you get at the store, the cat food that you get, the little chunks are so heavily processed that they have to add vitamins to them, which is not that different to what vegans who are feeding dogs and cats vegan are doing, which is they're taking um, plant foods in a suitable macronutrient ratio because dogs and cats have a different macronutrient ratio to humans. Humans have a macronutrient ratio, an ideal macronutrient ratio of about 80-10-10. That's 80% carbohydrates, 10% fat, 10% protein by calories. So by weight, it would be a little different because fat has twice the calories for a given weight. Um, and then, of course, there's a whole series of micronutrients that humans need. Um, Dogs have a substantially higher amount of protein and fat, as do cats. So dogs can tolerate more carbohydrates, cats less so. So you have to really consider the ideal macronutrient ratio, and then you have to add the micronutrients on top of that. Um, the the main issue with cats again is the urinary pH, which is many cats have no trouble with it at all, but some cats like some cats being fed a non-vegan diet, they can end up with too high a pH to dissolve the crystals in their urine, and they end up with crystals forming in their urine, and that can cause blockages, um, urinary blockages, which is a veterinary issue that has to be dealt with. So what vegan cat feeders usually do is they'll test the cat's urinary pH, every month or every couple of months, and if it's getting too high, then they'll add cranberries to their diet to lower the pH. Pretty easy to fix. So it's not something that. And what we're really fortunate now is that it actually has a pretty strong scientific basis. There've been enough people feeding vegan cats for long enough that the science is pretty well known, and there's now commercial vegan cat foods available and dog foods, and you can also do if you're interested in making your own vegan pet food, then you can do that. Based on recipes that have been established and used for a long period of time now. Also, we have some very interesting examples of very, very long-lived vegan pets. For instance, the dog Bramble lived to 26 years old and was fed a vegan diet. And this dog was actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for some time. I think now they've been older lived dogs, but that's pretty impressive that one of the oldest lived dogs ever in history happened to have been a vegan dog. And it is thought now that, just like with humans, that feeding a vegan diet to dogs and cats also increases their longevity.
Specifically, if you compare it to the standard trash diet.
Right, compared to the standard diets.
Yeah, because the processed diets, let me be honest, where the most animal pet diets exist at is trash flash.
Well, dogs and cats don't live very long. Most predators don't live
Yeah.
very long. It's because they're eating large amounts of saturated fat, large amounts of cholesterol,
Yeah.
they tend to end up with vascular problems, just like humans do when they start to behave like predators. When they start to consume a diet that would be more suitable for a predator than for an herbivore or a frugivore, like
Yeah.
they are actually more suited for. So, this is just a dietary issue that we actually may be doing our pets a favor by feeding them vegan diets.
Mm-hmm. I was myself thinking about taking adopting dog or cat, but I was not sure if I have the time for it actually. But I was thinking about it.
Well, many vegans, dogs and cats, again, you can feed them vegan. Um, Many vegans adopt rabbits, however. Rabbits are the third most popular pet in the United Kingdom right now.
Yeah, the problem is a bit. I have a bit of problem with it because I'm a bit allergic to guinea pigs um, guinea pigs and rabbits.
I see, I see. So rabbits wouldn't be as suitable then.
No, I cannot hold them in my house, and I've not that good of a garden.
The other vegan animal would be a bird. Um, you can sometimes you can rescue chickens. Chickens make excellent pets. Also, parrots, very interesting pets. So, the idea is to find an animal in need of rescue, and then make them part of your household, and make them. We treat animals as vegans treat animals as family members, so they're not considered things or its. They're he's and she's, and they have personalities, and they're individuals in their own right, and that they're considered to be family members that we take care of and love and treat with respect.
Mm-hmm. Uh,
Kind of like non-human children.
yeah, I find that, it's a bit that's I find it hard to find. Yeah, it's quite hard to find some rescue parrots, and I think chicken.
They are rare. They are
Yeah.
rare, but sometimes you can find parrots that are being rehomed. Like, for instance, if they're their human is going off to school or something and then can't have the parrot anymore, uh, there will be ads in the papers to rehome a parrot.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, they live a really long time. You
yeah,
know, they can live 50 years.
yeah,
So
and here, if I want to have a chicken, I need to have a special room for it.
oh, you need to like have like a house for it.
Yeah, I need to have a special room for the chickens, a special place for the
Chickens
chickens.
Chickens are adorable. They can make very good pets. Roosters are a bit noisy, so you have to take that into account because they like to, they like to crow in the morning. So not all, you might be fine with it, but your neighbors might not be. Um,
Yeah, I've probably been awake before the roaster.
but chickens are female chickens are very fun. They're pleasant. I actually had a duck for as a family member for a while. Ducks are very interesting. He can be very affectionate. My duck used to follow me around all the time, go swimming with me. He was very, very sweet duck.
Yeah, I
Um,
wanted to have a pig, but I have looked at it and I cannot have a pig in my house.
um, a lot of the animals. See, pigs are able to be. One of the great thing about dogs and cats is that they're fairly easily potty trained. So, if you're looking for a non-human to make a family member, you probably want one that's able to be potty trained. Otherwise, they have to live outside, and you know, often they don't feel as much part of the family if they're left outside. Um, so pigs are able to be potty trained. They're actually, they've got this reputation of being dirty creatures, but they're actually very, very clean.
Yeah, and the landlord does not allow farm animals.
Not allow pigs. They don't allow pigs. Um, so if I would say probably birds. A bird might be a good option if you don't have an allergy to birds. Um, I know my mother has had a bird come to live with her, and he's a conure, I think. Now he's very noisy, and she's slightly deaf, so that works out great for her. but you should keep that into account, or take that into account when adopting a bird. Is that sometimes they're very, very noisy, and conures are in that category. So basically, I think it's important for humans to relate to other creatures. I think these animals that live as family members with us are ambassadors of the animal kingdom, to teach us humans, respect for their side of the world, for the way they see things, for their nations within our nation,
Hmm.
living within our nations. And I think that they have. Um, I heard one person say to me, "Well, we're different from animals because we have imagination." I was like, "Have you never seen a dog dream? Dogs dream, obviously, and they're obviously, doing things like they're eating or they're running around or they're barking at things, and so they've obviously got the ability to imagine, and pretty much when you really get down to it, whatever humans do, there's probably an animal that was doing it too." Um, there's a few things maybe that are unique to humans, maybe like written languages, but for the most part,
Yeah,
humans and
some people
animals.
also have no written languages. Some tribes.
Oh, some human tribes, yes, but some humans do have written languages, and I think
Yeah,
that's a somewhat unique. I mean, unlike the imagination thing, which is obviously disprovable very easily, written
yeah.
languages, you'd have to try to figure out which other animals have written languages. It would, you know, it's not a common thing, um, among in the animal kingdom. So maybe we've got a little bit of an edge there. But
Yeah, but then also you need to ask yourself the question: is it useful for those other species?
well, what it does. Oh, is it useful for them? That's a good question. Like, do they need it? Probably not. I mean, the thing about animals is they're all complete. they're perfectly able to survive on their own. And, other than maybe some domesticated species, for the most part, wild species are complete in and of themselves. They do not need anything that humans do. They have their lives, they have their reproduction, they have their food sources, they do everything without our help. you know so, or without all the technology that we use to do that for ourselves. So, I think we need to have respect for the fact that their technology is natural, is part of nature, and that they're not creating climate change problems. They're not creating environmental issues. They're generally with some exceptions, they're generally much more eco-friendly and working within the natural systems. And that's another thing, is that humans need to revert to their natural diet. I mean, it's causing disease, it's causing environmental degradation, it's causing huge animal suffering. We really need to revert to our natural diet. We need to go back to our fruits, nuts, seeds, and veggies diet, and
Yeah,
really.
but, but when it also come collectively, not individually, but collectively, there is no species on the planet that is more environmentally destructive than us, than the so-called
And
human.
I agree, and I think a large part of that destruction arises from our diet, our erroneous diet,
Mm-hmm.
and so we really need to correct that. That'll certainly help improve our status on the planet. Right now we are an abomination
Yeah,
as a species.
we are
We are,
like an extremely detrimental virus.
yeah, we are. We need to control our population. We need to do,
Yeah,
we need to definitely change our diet. Um,
we also need to we also need to make laws that controls the the limits of population growth. I think.
I think that needs to happen. I think that what is not really clear right now is like how it should happen. There have been experiments with population control in countries like China. Um, they have undesirable, side effects from doing this, and it's,
Yeah,
this,
that's partly because of how their culture is. In China, for example, they have some weird thing that they favor boys more than girls.
right. I think it has to do with the way the genders, you know,
Yeah,
produced economically.
and that's there is some old traditional thing in China that when a girl marries, she becomes a part of the family of the man, and she don't see their there don't do much anymore for the family of her. Actually, she becomes cut off from the family from her parents, something like that.
So
So
that's interesting. That there are definitely different traditions that have,
I
different
have
human
here
traditions.
I have heard that it is less common, specifically in the cities, but in some of the villages, they still have that weird thing, and that's also one of the reasons there are now a two-children policy, is that a one-child policy in the villages.
Oh, they have a two-child policy instead of a one-child policy.
Yeah, in the villages. In the city, if I if I remember it good, there have one still, but in the villages there have now two, if I
That's
remember good. Because of that, because of the jealous that I did kill so much girl children because I want to have a boy.
I think it's a matter of education and elevating women to the status that they can easily take if they wish to, which is elevating women to equal status
Mm-hmm.
with males. Um, once that's done and women are no longer treated as property, um, and instead are treated as individuals, then, which is kind of what vegans are asking for, not for non-humans also. We don't want non-humans to be treated as property. We
Yeah,
want them to be treated as individuals with rights and opportunities. um, I'm not
to
saying
be to have.
I'm not saying we have to send our dogs to college, but I
Yeah,
am saying that
it's
we
just that they can live happy with the riches that they want in their life instead of being pushed around like objects.
right, and then murdered without regard for the fact that they don't want to die.
Hmm.
I mean, no healthy creature wants to die. It's just the way things are, and you can't say that that chicken on somebody's plate wanted to die for that person. They didn't. They valued their life. It was a violent act that took that life from them. So if you are buying products of violence, then you've got that on your conscience. It is the it's the hitman is just as guilty of murder as the person who ordered it. So you've ordered a hit, and that hit is on your plate, and you're consuming the product of that violence. That creates a karmic burden, a burden on your conscience, whether you wish to acknowledge it or not. And that's an important thing that vegans get to avoid. It's a big plus. We don't have to feel guilty anymore. We don't have to feel that that we're living at the expense of another sentient being. And by sentience, I mean the ability to suffer, because we all suffer. We can all suffer. Every creature can suffer if they're mistreated. And what right do we have to make another suffer if we don't need to?
Yeah, the only time that you can use force, if you ask me, um, but some may consider violence, is to defense the defenseless.
It's self-defense.
Yeah,
And some people say,
vicarious
well,
self.
what
Yeah.
if
I was
what
talking
if
about
I'm in a
vicarious
you know
self-defense.
right? And this there's a certain self-defense case to be made for some people's consumption of animals. If you're living above the Arctic Circle and you have no chance to be able to farm, or it's the winter time
Yeah,
and all you can do is cut a hole in the ice and eat and catch a fish and eat it. I can understand that. Maybe you're not supposed to be living in that environment
yeah.
because it's pretty obvious that you
There's
shouldn't.
also something to say about that. Most people that live there in the Arctic, there have warmed houses. There have TV. There have they buy guns.
Well, let's put it this way: if you
So
live near a grocery,
yeah,
if you live near a well-stocked grocery store, you can afford to shop at it.
yeah.
You have no excuse not to be vegan. All right,
Hmm.
you could easily be vegan. You can go and buy the
Yeah,
fruits and the vegetables. If you can't afford to shop at it, then you may need to take other action. If you don't live near a grocery store, you might need to take other action.
yeah.
But if you live near a grocery store you can afford to shop
Yeah,
at, you've got news.
what I just wanted to say is, if you if you live there and you can afford to buy a gun, and you can afford to live in a warm house with electricity and that all of that stuff, then I see no reason why you not can buy plants on the supermarket.
Nice. Right. Those, these people, if you live above the Arctic Circle and you're not living in an igloo, I think we're talking about people that are, again, you live near a grocery store you can afford to shop at. That's my criteria, because I understand that maybe somebody got, you know, shipwrecked on a desert island, or I understand that somebody maybe lives in an extremely primitive way out in the wilderness somewhere. I can
Yeah,
understand those situations. That's a survival situation.
yeah.
Most of
Also,
us humans are not living in a survival situation. We've got grocery stores we can afford to shop at. If that's the case, go vegan.
yeah, and also about that desert, deserted island. I was thinking then, now a deserted island. What can there be? Hmm, maybe maybe banana trees or coconut trees. There was actually in World War II was a Japanese soldier that did escape because he did fly for the war and did live for around 40 years if I remember good on a diet that existed mostly out of bananas and coconut.
Right. Well, that's probably a pretty good diet actually. It's got fats, carbohydrates, proteins. I mean, there's
Yeah.
an entire population that lives quite healthily on sweet potatoes. That's it. Sweet potatoes. That's like their diet is almost like 100% sweet potatoes. so,
That
so,
sounds
so
funny.
I know it's unusual to think that you could live on sweet potatoes,
Yeah.
but this is, uh,
The, the,
the myth,
yeah.
the myth of the native hunter is really should be replaced with the fact of the native gatherer,
Yeah.
because hunting was not it was an option.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't have to hunt. You could just as easily go around and gather things. I had a Native American visitor once. I lived in a teepee for 8 months. It was a delightful experience. And I had a Native American visit me, and he said, "Oh, we have vegetarians among our Native Americans," and he said, "But we call them poor hunters." So so if you were a poor hunter, you were a gatherer. That was your option, and
Yeah.
that was perfectly acceptable.
Also, if you if you also uh, think about it, like what I did say earlier about that from Rita Lower, she did say that the majority of Native American tribes were actually before Columbus did come and other conquerors later did live mostly on a diet that existed out some kind of um, bean, some kind of squash, and some kind of grain.
I see.
And Mayas, actually, according to some of the studies that I did see, did live on a diet that existed mostly out of corn. They were called the corn people
Corn people. Mm.
because their diet existed out of mostly corn. And they also did have a weird meats that actually did that were created from corn. And if I remember good, in that origin story, um, women were made from white corn, and men were made from yellow corn.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, they did say that God, that the corn goddess that created man from corn, and it brings soul into the corn form.
Well,
That's
I think
very.
that
That sounds very funny.
well, one of the things that I've noticed among the Native American population living in this area is that they tend to be, on average, obese.
All right.
Clinically obese. Some of them extremely obese. And I think that this is partly because they're eating animal products, thinking that their tradition involves animal product eating, and really they're not realizing that this is creating insulin resistance. This is creating excessive amount of fat intake, high cholesterol. They're dying early of heart disease and other problems. What they really have to do is go back to their ancestral diet. Go back
Yeah.
to their beans and squash and grains, and see if that I would say that probably in 90% of cases that's going to resolve their obesity problems.
I'm for sure. I'm sure about that. That will probably very much improve their health.
Yeah, and improve their longevity by
Mm-hmm.
5 to 10 years at least. And 5 to 10 years may not sound a lot when you're 20 years old, but when you're 70 years old, it's a lot. It's a lot. And you have to think about your not just your lifespan, but also your health span. How long are you? Not just how long are you going to live, but how long are you going to live healthy? In other words, live in such a way that you're happy to be living because you're healthy. Health is priceless, and the best thing you can do for your health is go vegan, and go vegan in a way that makes that's intelligent. Like don't just eat potato chips or Oreo cookies. That's what we call a junk food vegan. But be careful about it. But you want to go whole food plant based diet, high raw whole food plant based diet. If you really want the raw vegan high, which believe me, if you suffer from depression, it's pretty amazing. Raw vegan is a fantastic option. Um, so it helps reverse the vegan diet is the only diet proven to help reverse heart disease. Um, it's it's the cure for so many issues that plague humans in the modern era. So I think, and certainly the animal cruelty. If you've ever been to a factory farm, you probably just want to rescue them all. It is so sad. It's such a sad thing to see animals treated like commodities, like things, instead of like the individuals they really are. So I look forward to a different world, a world where animals can be happy, safe, and free. And I'm willing to be active for that. Oh, you asked me earlier what to do in terms of animal rights activism. Well, I started with the first thing, go vegan, because really that's activism. Go vegan, and then tell everyone you went vegan and why, because that's activism too. The first activism is boycotting. The second activism is called speaking out, and the third activism, well, getting involved in the animal rights movement, starting to make changes at a legal level that protect animals and give them rights. That'll, starting to oppose the creation of factory farms, helping encouraging the shutting down of even engaging in this somewhat new technique called open rescue, and that is where people who have legal experience go into factory farms and rescue animals and take the legal consequences in order to be able to create a legal precedent. This is what's happening right now in California. The founder of Direct Action Everywhere, Wayne Chung, has taken it upon himself to rescue animals from factory farms and be arrested for doing that, and then he's actually a lawyer. He's pursuing the legal cases in order to get the legal precedent set in the state of California. Because law is not just set by legislators; it's also set by legal precedent, and legal precedents can then be used to argue in further legal cases that something should or should not be penalized. So it's very important in situations where you're having a hard time getting legislators to make the changes that you want. Like we had very little difficulty actually passing a fur ban in California. We just did the normal process. We lobbied legislators. We went to the Sacramento. We talked to and we spoke out at council meetings, and it went through all the committees. We got the fur ban in place. No new fur is going to be sold in the state of California. All fur farms are to shut in the state of California. No trapping of animals in the state of California. This is a big deal. Okay, this is a really big deal. No trapping for fur, I should mention. So that was a relatively easy one. Fur had been out of style, out of vogue for quite some time in California. Groups like People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, had made it pretty clear that fur was unethical. It's not cool to be cruel, and wearing fur is just a sign of your complete indifference to the suffering of the creature who it belonged to. So I think that was a fairly easy legislative change to make. When you're talking about stopping meat, though, or getting animals out of factory farms, you've got a much bigger cultural issue to deal with. I think we could start with things like a meat tax. Start putting the environmental tax of meat onto its price. We can start with things like removing the government subsidies for animal products. That will also make the prices higher, which will reduce demand and lead people to move to vegan products. We can, and then when it comes to factory farms, we can lobby for no more factory farms. That's the current motto of DXC in California: is no more factory farms. But the open rescue thing is a little different. This is very interesting. If you happen to have legal experience and want to apply it, This is something you could also consider, is making a legal precedent in your jurisdiction about how it is ethical to rescue an animal. Just like you'd want to rescue a dog inside a hot car who's dying, you know, taking sick and dying animals and taking them to a vet taking sick and dying animals at a factory farm and taking them to vets for medical treatment, and then to sponsoring their lives at sanctuary farms for the rest of their lives. That is that is a very interesting legal precedent, and that is what Open Rescue is attempting to do in the state of California. So, um, if you have laws that protect, say, that enable a good Samaritan to rescue a dog by breaking a car window to let the dog out if their dog looks like the dog is going to die in a car, we have that law in California, and that law is what we are saying. What is the difference, really, between rescuing a dog in a hot car versus rescuing a chicken, sick and dying chicken at a factory farm, and taking them to the vet? What is the difference? There really isn't. They're both animals. They have, they should have similar legal status. So, we're making that analogy and using that analogy to hopefully allow humans to go into factory farms and rescue the creatures that are suffering there. So
Hmm.
I hope that's going to make a big difference. And Wayne is busy right now preparing his legal case to go to trial.
Yeah, there are a lot of people here that are put not their dogs in the car, even if it's not warm, extremely warm, because they are afraid that people will break their windows.
Right. Well, if they're legally allowed to do that, and that's the case in California, that a good Samaritan is legally allowed to break the window of a car in order to rescue a dog trapped inside, then
I don't know if
you
we.
should be able to. Then you should be able to
Yeah,
go into a factory farm and rescue sick and dying animals and take them to a vet, and then you know put them into a sanctuary farm for the rest of their lives.
I, do,
So,
I don't know if we have a good Samaritan laws here actually.
well, there might be. Now, one of the things that I really like the analogy of the Good Samaritan. In case people aren't aware of it, it's a biblical story. It's a story about how there was a person that was had been mugged, if you like, and they were laying at the side of the road, and there were people that were walking by and not contributing to their harm, but were not helping them. These are a bit like vegans. Vegans boycott the harm to to the individual that's there. Animal rights activists, on the other hand, are more like the Good Samaritan who went and gave that, helped that person, got him treatment, uh, gave him clothing that had been stolen, and basically supported that individual and got them back on their feet. That's how you should be. That is the right attitude to take. Is the attitude of the Good Samaritan. You see someone suffering, you see someone who needs help. You don't just walk by and not contribute to the suffering. You go and you help them, and that's what we're doing with the animal rights activism. Is we're actually actively helping, and I hope that people, certainly by all means, boycott the cruelty, boycott the violence of animal agriculture. But if you can, if you have the time, if you have the inclination, please get involved in a hands-on way in helping,
Yeah,
create a
yeah,
safer world for everyone,
yeah,
including our non
yeah.
brothers and sisters.
Sadly, there are not all in all places in the world have good Samaritan laws. I know, for example, in China they have absolutely no good Samaritan laws, according to some people that I know that live there.
Well, I think the Good Samaritan thing is more of an ethic, and the laws that are in place sometimes protect a Samaritan from a Good Samaritan from being prosecuted for issues like, for instance, if they try to help somebody, they could be protected under these laws. So the Good Samaritan laws are a little, can be protective to Samaritans who try to help. Um, because there could be a situation, let's say somebody is in a car crash, and their car's on fire, and they maybe have a dislocated, or they have a broken spine or something, and somebody tries to pull them out of the Good Samaritan comes and tries to pull them out of the car so that the car doesn't explode and kill them. but in doing so, harms their spine even further. Do you see what I mean? It's like they're
Yeah.
legally protected. You know, the liability is that they tried to help. They were trying to help in a life-threatening situation, and maybe they did some harm in trying to help, but that the intention was there to help.
All right. Um, yeah. And I know what you mean, but I don't know. I've not looked into the law for that goods to know if we have that kind of laws here.
Also,
Also, the character the
liability issues are different in different countries. Like in the United States, because of we have a private healthcare system, liability issues are more significant. If you have a public healthcare system, they tend to be less significant. So, you know, the U.S.
yeah.
has to be people in the U.S. are often much more careful about liability.
We
Yes.
have we have yeah, we have our healthcare system is one that is sponsored, that is that's from actually we pay a little bit, we pay around 300 or something like that a year, and then you can, if you go over that you pay more. Okay, then you cannot pay more, you pay not more, you pay 300 and that's the base of it. It is not that expensive. Anybody can go to the doctor if they want.
Right. As it should be.
if if my neighbor have a stomach ache and he wants to go to the doctor for that, he can go for the doctor for that, and it does not cost him to go live on the street because it is too expensive. Is it is that scenario cost? Is that truly that in the United States can cost you to be living on the street for one visit to the doctor? It's so expensive.
Oh, I see. I wouldn't say one visit to the doctor, but maybe a a trip in the ambulance. An ambulance costs, I think, $500 to call the ambulance, and then they take you to the hospital, and then there's whatever treatments you have there, and they might like some people. Let's say you're treated, you're thought to have an appendicitis attack. Um, they take you in the into the ambulance. Let's say if you couldn't get there by yourself, and then you get you to the hospital, and then they prep you for surgery, and then
Yeah.
you're hit with a $10,000 bill.
Yeah. Surgery. I think surgery is not. I think surgery is not covered by the health insurance, but a lot of other stuff well. If you want to have plastic surgery, that they don't want, they don't give you that.
What about something like appendix removal? Would that be covered?
I have to
Is this
look.
emergency
I have.
surgery?
I think if it is necessary, then it will be.
Probably
Yeah.
necessary surgery.
If it is life threatening, then it will probably be covered or can be covered.
But plastic surgery doesn't count. I got
I don't know what kind of things are covered in the United States for people that are rich enough to have a private one. Alice,
that.
people that are in the United States that are rich enough to have a private one. How much do you think that how what is covered under those things? Private healthcare
Oh,
thing.
they have private healthcare.
Yeah.
Well, the there's there's really two types of healthcare. There is private healthcare, which you pay for an insurance policy, and then you go to a private doctor. There's a certain amount of public health care for low-income people. So things like Medicaid, Medicare, for there's one is for the elderly and one is for the low-income individuals. So that provides those who can afford it pay for it. Those who can't afford it have it provided as a government benefit.
All right.
So it's not really, if somebody was really destitute and had no assets, like say they were homeless and they needed to go to a doctor, that would be covered by Medicaid.
All right.
Or is it Medicare? One of the two. Hold on.
Um, and that's also different per state, I guess. How much will be
Oh, okay.
covered?
No, Medicare is for the elderly. Medicaid is for the low income.
And is that also different designed per state?
I live in California, so I can't speak for every state.
All right. Well, maybe you did hear something. So I was curious. Maybe you did.
States have different laws. It's almost like different countries. I mean, there are federal laws, but like you might think of it like this: the countries within the European Union, they each have their own local laws, but then there's European laws. So in the U.S., it's like federal laws are like the European laws, and then state laws are like the country laws. In like German laws or French laws, so
Yeah,
they're all.
different parts of Germany also can sometimes have different laws.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, we can have local ordinances.
Yeah, because Germany is so big.
Right.
Also, for example, you have some different laws from what I did here in Bavaria than you have in the higher part of Germany.
Okay. Well, see, California is huge. California is a massive, massive state. It probably should be several states, but it is a really, really large. It is the fifth largest economy in the world. So California, when things change, and California is also very progressive. So when things change in California, it's a big deal. Like when you ban fur in California, you've made a big impact because it has a big economic impact. I that's one of the great things about living in California is it is really on the cutting edge of you know technology in some ways. It's also on the cutting edge of progressive politics and social justice. So I think it's very significant that the DXC has its headquarters in California and is making most of its political statements and legal statements in California at this time.
I have a question. Is Texas the less progressive state in the United States? Progressive state?
I wouldn't like to say anything negative about my Texan brethren, but there is something of a reputation of Texas being that way. There are places in Texas that are very progressive, like Austin, for example. But that is perhaps not typical of Texas.
Yeah, because I've heard that there is a kind of stereotype of Texas of very overweight, very loud, Texas redneck that
Well, stereotypes
cowboy types.
are just that. I think we need to, maybe there is a tendency. I mean, a lot of cattle farms are in Texas, so people in Texas probably tend to eat more meat than other people. Well, when you eat more meat, you're more obese generally. Again, on a upper scale. So this is something that is potentially problematic.
Yeah,
For the population of Texas.
if I type in Texas Texan in Google, I get an overweight redneck rancher picture. It's the first thing that's popped up with my Google.
Alright, let's see. I'm Googling Texan.
I don't know if you also get it, but that's what I get.
I'm going to look at the Google images for Texans. Oh, going very slowly. I don't know why. Maybe there's just such a lot of Texans. I don't know. I don't know why Google's going so slowly right
Yeah,
now.
I get also a picture a lot of people who, if I now search on Texan people, and then I get a lot of people with cowboy hats and with creepy smiles.
Texan people. Okay, here we go.
And a guy with a gun with a Superman t-shirt. That's overweight.
Yeah, I do see a lot of people with cowboy hats on.
Yeah. The
I
pictures.
didn't see that many. I see less overweight people than I thought I was going to see.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what I did get. Close. Let's close my windows. A lot of I did get quite a lot of overweight people. Here are a lot. I've also a picture of a lot of chubby and overweight Texan people here. That's also what I did get.
Well, I think that I really want to avoid stereotyping people. I know that there are some vegans in Texas,
Yeah.
and I think that a lot of people have cognitive dissonance if they're involved in the cattle industry in Texas, and then they come across one of the Texan vegans. I've seen this on various Facebook groups. Somebody's posting sort of images of them, like raising cattle, for example, for slaughter, and the vegan makes a comment like, that's completely unnecessary. Why are you doing that? And then they get all the person who's doing it gets all upset and angry and yells at the vegan for the vegan, saying that they just don't need. It's not necessary. It's not nice. It's not kind. It's not. They say things like, "Oh, I treat my cows just like children." I'm like, do you send your children off to slaughter too? Do you castrate your children as well? Um, there's a lot of things that are done to animals that are very unpleasant, and it's obviously something you wouldn't be doing to your children. You're not treating your cows like children. I'm sorry, that's just not true. And it's maybe a mind image that they have of themselves in order to think of themselves as good people. But really, you can't be raising animals for slaughter and be a good person. You're just not. And I would urge anybody that is doing that to really look to find an alternative to what they're currently doing. Get out of that business. There's no reason to harm others for personal profit. You can find another business.
Yeah, according to this, yeah, let's.
Oh, I sent you a message, Graham.
Oh, you did send me a message?
Yes.
Alright. Then I guess we need to end it so soon. I hope you did like this podcast a little bit. I hope Alice also have a nice day further. Um,
Thank you.
I I'm curious how will come next time up. I also did send a message in a Discord group asking people if they want to come on my podcast, talk a little bit about um, so actually how they did become vegan, because then I maybe can maybe understand how other people can go, how they did become vegan. Other people can maybe hear a little bit about how other people did become vegan. Maybe can relate also. Maybe go vegan because they can relate to the other people that I bring on the podcast. And that I think I will do from now if I can do that. Any Monday around 7 I think we'll start. So I wish you a nice day. I think I'm gonna to eat some fruits. Maybe I'm gonna to stream after this a little bit Final Fantasy because I sometimes play in the evening in the fantasy right now because I needed to play some other game for for some for some weeks. I cannot play that long in a row the same stuff. I need to do stuff, then wait, and then go back into it. I also find the story of Final Fantasy 14 quite interesting. What I do actually right now is I play the game and then read loud out the text actually of the characters with different voices. Um, that's what I'm streaming in the evening lately.
All
And I
right,
fi-
Bertha. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for the invitation to participate in your podcast. I hope it goes really well. And if you'd like someone to come on at a future time and talk about this similar topics or a different topic, just let me know. Be happy to come.
All right. If there is another topic I wanted to talk on the podcast, then I will say that to you, and then I'll invite you again. If you have time, then you can come. Otherwise, I need to invite some other person for the next podcast. And bye bye, people. When darkness and light become one, the reality splinter away, and the truth become visible.